we'll go ahead and get started. And we're recording this so we can share it with those who couldn't join us. And welcome. We are super glad that you're here. Um, a quick thing before we get into all the information that Emily has to share. I have questions for her. And then at the end, we have plenty of time for everybody else to ask questions too. Super casual, just bring whatever you want to know about. Thanks for being so generous and doing this, Emily. Um,
Absolutely.
and then this Zoom is just it's a part of something bigger where we're all kind of doing this alone. I mean, I know I'm panicking, Googling, looking in AI, trying to find out resources. I'm second guessing myself. Am I doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? What all's out there? So, I mean, we have a lot of smart friends, and we decided to put a collaboration together. And so we have a community. And we just ask each other questions. We plan Zooms like this where we bring mutual friends who are experts about different topics. The next one that we're going to do is about how teens can earn money. I have two teens that are little entrepreneurs and they earn well. And so we're going to share some ideas. And there's other families that do the same thing. So we're going to have that Zoom. And then, anyway, this community, there's 6 people in there now. Two extra are going to join tonight. We keep it small on purpose. I'll just show you what it looks like. No. You'll see I have way too many tabs open for any person. Um, but you'll see we just shared topics, answers, questions. We've got a spreadsheet in there that we're collaborating on now that has scholarships and competitions for entrepreneurial kids. So, and then we also have a spreadsheet that we're sharing and working on ideas for teens to make money. So, take a look at it. I'll drop a link in it. But this Zoom is part of that overall initiative, like working together to figure this out. Um, okay, so Emily Reno. Uh, I met her in, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I guess, and I have followed what she has done, just really carved out a dream life for herself. And it started with the education that she went and funded herself. And so I'm really inspired by her path and I'm grateful that she come and share it with us. So Emily, that's my very first question to you, which is like tell tell the group who you are, what you do.
Awesome. Yeah. So something kind of interesting too is on the Mexican side, I'm actually known as Emily Godinez, which relates to some of my story and life path. I'm actually Mexican American and I recently claimed my Mexican citizenship. So on the US side, I'm Emily Reno, because I changed my last name when I turned 18. So I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas. I am a proud Jayhawk. I'm also a child of the 90s. I consider myself a hardcore environmentalist. I was a digital nomad for about 2 years after graduate school and after living in Minnesota for about 6 years before deciding to become a dual citizen here in Mexico. I'm currently calling in from Coahuila, so I'm in northern Mexico, but I lived in San Miguel for about 6 months and it was crazy cool, the people that I got to meet there. I consider myself an entrepreneur. I am a grant writer and an educator, and I paid for pretty much all of my education through scholarships that I found and applied for myself. That was about 8 years of university, which completely changed the way that I saw opportunity. And since then, I built this career that really spans, sustainable agriculture, international work, storytelling through the podcasting work that I do, entrepreneurship and education. And today I help people find funding and create meaningful opportunities for themselves and realize that there are so many different paths to building a successful life and really defining what success means for themselves, not what anybody else's looks like. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks. Okay. So to give people like a practical idea of what you're talking about, take us back to the very beginning. You graduated high school. What did you do and what did your education look like? Because I want to make sure that the group understands this is not the 4-year university. I'm going to raise money through a, GoFundMe situation. This is completely different and more similar to what we think is possible with our kids.
Yeah. Well, I will say it's important to understand my financial situation, and this will relate to some of the other things that we talk about today. But I didn't realize that we, as a family, had grown up in poverty until I was in community college when I was in a sociology class and we started learning about what government programs were out there for people that were like resource scarce. And that to me just like blew my mind, knowing that, like, oh, that's why we would go to all of these like after school programs and like these things were funded by the federal government to help people who didn't have, a lot of money. And so when it came time to like even start having a conversation about what are you going to do after high school, it was very clear from my parents that we do not have the financial resources to support you and you're on your own. You can live at home, but that is like our scholarship to you is that we're not going to charge you rent. Like you can stay here. We'll make sure that you're fed, but you're responsible for everything else. And they really fostered that within me at a really young age too, where it's like, I think I was 14 when I started driving. I was given a car, but I was responsible for paying for gas, all repairs, car insurance. I had to get a job when I was that age too, right? So there was a lot of that in terms of just the context in which I was operating. And I took it on as a challenge to myself. I didn't really perceive this as like, oh, woe is me. Like, I'm never going to be able to go to school. My mom was always just like, I don't care what you study, but you need to go to college. And she's like, just do something that makes you happy. Like, that's my only request. And so I took that on as like my personal mission of, okay, the only thing that you have to focus your energy on, Emily, is to figure out how to fund your education. And so I started just like at that time, Google was really the only option that we had other than just talking to people. Just started Googling online, like scholarships for college. And that probably would have been, I was probably like 14 or 15 when I started looking into this stuff. And I found that most people were saying, there's these different categories. You can either go the like financial need based route or you can go the merit based route. So based on your grades, like what are you getting in school? And that the odds of you getting a scholarship are higher. Like you get the extra brownie points if you can show some kind of community service. And so that really stuck with me because I was like, okay, I got to start volunteering. And my mom, she was very supportive of that for both my sister and I. We started volunteering at the public library for their like teen volunteer program. I started walking dogs at the local dog shelter. I painted set pieces at the community theater. I started teaching Spanish classes at the local church. I think in high school, I volunteered for a group called Citizens Climate Lobby, where it's like you're lobbying for carbon tax legislation because I was like super gung ho about how are we going to save the planet. And I knew that I needed to be able to start making a clear connection between like these volunteering things that I was doing and then the things that I would be writing about in my application and sort of what I wanted to do with my studies. So when I was graduating from high school, and it's like, okay, at that point, most people said, like, if you start looking in senior year, you're too late. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. So like I need to start earlier. And they're like, really, like junior year is the time when you should be focusing on preparing for that. So that senior year is just like smooth sailing. You just knock out your classes and then you can breathe deep knowing that you have like somewhat of a plan. And so at that point, I I recognize that I'm going to have to rely 100% on scholarships in order to pay for my education. And if not, I'm going to have to probably work a part-time or full-time job outside of school. I had narrowed it down at that point to the University of Texas at Austin. So I was particularly interested in the city. I wasn't so much like, oh, this school, but I wanted to think about what community do I want to live in after I graduate? And what kind of networks of people do I want to be connected to? And Austin really spoke to me. It was like a very liberal town or city in the Midwest still. It was in within like a reasonable driving distance of my family. That was also something that I was thinking about. And then I looked at community college. My sister had already kind of carved a path down that route. She's 2.5 years older than me. And so I witnessed her get scholarships to be able to attend this community college for a culinary arts program. And she was 2 years into, I think it was a 3 year program. And then she stuck around for another year for baking and pastry. And I witnessed her super happy with her classes, her professors. She was paying at least a third of the price of what going to a 4 year institution would be. And so I was like, this is interesting. And then I started looking at the University of Kansas, which was the big, university in my hometown. So it was like, that's the easy option. That's what everybody was expected to do. It was like, oh, you're just going to go to KU. And I knew that that was going to be a hard one to swing because the scholarships were so competitive. Even if you had a 4.0 grade average, you would still have to have a very high ACT or SAT score. And so those were the things I was like, I'm not really sure that that's going to work in my favor. So I'm going to focus on all these other things that make me star, human and student and well-rounded by focusing on, playing viola. And like, I'm going to continue down like a music route, and I'm going to continue volunteering in the community to show that I'm not just this one thing, and that I can fit in lots of boxes, and that, I'm making like a valuable contribution to society. That was sort of like these things that were going through my head. And ultimately, well, maybe I'll hold off on that part, but I'll just push pause there on the answer to that question. You're muted, Molly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Um, okay, so when you were looking for those scholarships, and a lot of the ones that you've told me about were for like project work off in other countries and cool adventures. And how did you find that sort of not, what was the process? How did you find where the money was?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So I graduated, I had these options, and it was a financial decision that I ended up getting a Fulbright scholarship to the community college. And that was where all the magic started. That was the point. It was like, okay, I could either take on debt and go to this 4 year school, or I could have a Fulbright scholarship and do these like basic education, like credits for my associate's degree, knowing that it will transfer to pretty much any 4 year degree at a 4 year university. Johnson County Community College is like top two in the country in the United States for community colleges. It is in the wealthiest suburb of Kansas City, and they are one of the most well-funded community colleges in the country. What does this mean? They have an insane amount of scholarships that are available to their students to help offset not only their education, but also travel for international opportunities. And that's where it was one thing. It was like, again, I was going to this school, preparing myself for an environmental studies degree, and knew that I wanted to travel internationally. But I knew that I didn't have any money to do it. And so I was like, hey, if I paid for my education, why can't I find scholarships to also, travel to these places? So some of them were programs that were existing within the college. There was a particular exchange program that the solar department and the nurses program had with a nonprofit based in a suburb of Guadalajara in Mexico, interestingly enough. And you would apply as a student to go, and then you'd get to spend basically 7 days, 7 to 9 days in the suburb working with families, building solar water heaters alongside the community with materials that you could find just from your general hardware store. That trip honestly changed my life and is one of the reasons why I am the person that I am today. Was that particular trip. I ended up serving on a committee. This is also one of the very unique things about the college. It was called the Student Sustainability Committee. So they would take like $1 for every credit hour that students spent and put it towards what they called a sustainability fund. They then had a group of students with a select advisor of professors who would then advise on how to reinvest that money into the campus for sustainability related programs and projects. And then they would like measure the impact on that and look at the things later. They were working with $500,000 a semester, these students. And I was one of those students that was helping advise on how to spend that money. So we would invest in like, retrofitting the lights on campus and then using the money from savings to reinvest in scholarships for students, right? But that particular program is what then allowed us to go back to Mexico the following year. So I approached my professors and I said, this is a transformative experience for any student who is studying Spanish. Why don't we have Spanish students who are going on this trip? Like they need to be serving as informal interpreters to put into practice what they're learning in class. And I didn't have any pushback. They're like, yeah, that's actually a decent idea. Let's try that. And so then I pitched to them, like, hey, let's ask this committee for money to send an extra 5 students the following year on the same trip that's already organized. We got the approval, we brought more people, and at the same time, I ended up finding out about this competition program that was being hosted by the University of Kansas. So again, you're like Googling and talking to people about what you're passionate about, and they send you opportunities, whether it's via email or just in conversation. Most people at that point knew, like, hey, Emily's really into sustainability. I started to work for the Office of Sustainability as an intern. And that's how I found out about this opportunity, where there was the University Center for Eurasian Studies was doing this competition to basically like you form a team and you create a project to teach your community about sustainability. And the top 3 teams would get to travel to the exchange schools in Russia to basically learn about how they were also addressing sustainability in their community. The top 3 teams in Russia would then travel to Kansas essentially and travel around the state and learn about how we were addressing, issues of sustainability and climate change. So that ended up being a conflict with that trip to Mexico. So I ended up applying for funds, got extra students to go to this trip, and then I couldn't end up attending because I ended up going to Russia instead. Amazing experience. Everything was paid for. All we had to do was put in the effort of creating this brochure where it's like, oh, cool, we've got honeybees on campus and we have solar panels and like all of these other perks that people just don't know about. That was our project. And it ended up getting incorporated into like the welcoming packet for new students. So when they went on campus tours, they'd use this brochure and be like, hey, did you know we have all of these additional features, which was very cool. So that was one of those other things. Other stuff was like my spring break trip. They would have different opportunities where it's like, hey, we're going to take a group of students and we're going to go to Big Bend Park in Texas. If you want to apply, you can. And then they would send you the information. But this is the way that I was like finding out about these different travel opportunities while I was in school. The other thing I think that was key is that I would often subscribe to newsletters that had that information. I think that's probably more relevant now than it was back then, because most times I would just talk to my professors and then scour all of the university websites to try to find these opportunities. And that's how I would find out.
It occurs to me that you were really motivated, driven, a self-starter, and like as parent, and wasn't on the prepared list of questions. It's just hitting me like a train right now.
Go for it.
Um, as parents on this call, like how do we support that kind of like go? Because the opportunities that you're describing so far, they really have to be watching for in their own field of interest.
Yes. So the question is, how can you be supportive to having that kind of yeah, basically a student or a child that, okay, I'll say it's probably from the openness and support that I had from my parents about follow your passion because you can't go wrong. Like doors will open when you do so. And that's something I've learned along the way. I don't think that was something my mom ever said. She always just said, like, do what you love and trust that things are going to work out for you. And that's been the case. And so I think that having that openness And definitely that drive of like the financial piece of like, I don't have options. If I don't get the scholarship, I don't go. And that was like a hard line for me that I had set for myself. But I think just having that freedom and that support from our parents, and especially my mom, of like, fly, explore the world, because she grew up as an army brat or like an Air Force brat. So she moved around a lot when she was a kid. She was in California for a bit. I think she was like born in or spent some time when she was like 2 in Japan, and then she was in Arizona for a bit. So she moved around a lot. And I think that she understood from a younger age what it meant to be exposed to lots of different cultures and ideas. And she could see the value in my sister and I getting exposed to things that were different. The other thing, too, was that around the time that I was doing this, and this was a pretty big influence on me, my sister had this seed planted from one of her professors that she could go to school in Australia. And so around the time that I was doing this, she was like working almost full time outside of her schoolwork so that she could save up to go to the school in Australia. As of about 1 month ago, my sister is now also a dual citizen, but in Australia. So she spent about 10 years there before becoming a dual citizen. And I think that that also planted a seed for me of like, whoa, this is possible. My mom is supporting my sister to go to a school in a foreign country, and I don't know how long she's going to be there for. So I think that was also encouragement of like, hey, like your sister can do this. Like you can also dream big and explore the world and just like go for it. Because here was the other thing she always said, the worst case scenario is say no,
Hmm.
right? But like if you don't ask, you're not going to know. And I think that was a really big part too of just like that support that you guys like just because you apply for a job doesn't mean you're going to get offered it. Just because they offer you a job doesn't mean you have to accept it. Same thing with any kind of fellowship, accelerator opportunity, whatever these opportunities are that you're seeing post graduation, apply like mad, cast your net, knowing that not everything is going to land and that ultimately, like what was for you always was, and what wasn't for you never was.
Okay, so that brings us to the next question, the application process, right? So whether it's for a scholarship or like the grant applications that you do, um, like what makes a scholarship application really work? What separates the ones who get awarded from the ones that don't?
Yes, really good question. It seems really simple, but reading the application makes a difference. So, response to the questions that clearly indicates that you read the application and the priorities of what they're trying to fund, you're just going to be so much better off, right? Don't apply for a history scholarship when you really want to be a graphic designer. There are some people that just do that, right? It doesn't make sense, but they do it. The other piece is having really strong letters of support and references. One of the things that I did in high school to make the jobs of my teachers easier was that I would draft the like letter of support for them and be like, "Hey, do whatever you want to this, but here's a template for you to work from so that you can spend 15 more minutes with your family," right? And they responded really well to that. So do that. Don't be afraid to like fluff yourself up in those letters too, because most times they're going to be in agreement. Like, yep, sign off, right? The other piece is just having your flavor of who you are and your voice in your application. One of the things is like, okay, obviously AI is a really big thing right now, but if you think that AI alone is going to get you there, you better have a damn good model of your own writing that you're using, right? Because it's like there is no other you. And that's what people want to feel. Like bring your narrative to life through the textures, right? The place, the smells, the emotions, everything that's associated with those experiences that you've had that have been impactful, like those key life moments, your upbringing, right? Take people to those places because that's what people like, they latch on to that. They want to create that emotional connection with you. And if you can do that through your writing, just can't go wrong, right? Like if you get to the end of what you've read and your voice is cracking, right? Or it makes you tear up, that's where you should be. That's the kind of winning application that it's like when you pull people's heartstrings, they're going to love it. The other piece is really, and this is something that I learned just thinking about this after the fact, really connecting those dots between how your life experiences have shaped you as a person and how it's prepared you for the career that you're going after. That's like the most general and common question you will get in a scholarship application, especially for like colleges, fellowships, any kind of international experience. They want to be able to show, like, hey, why are you a good fit for this position? And so your job is to be really creative in morphing your life experience into, yes, I did this thing. Maybe it wasn't directly related, but these are the skills that I took away that are directly related, right? And so that was something that was a practice as I kept writing scholarship essays, is trying to figure out, okay, how was this thing that I did at the dog shelter help me become a great, environmental studies perspective student? The other thing is, like, don't be afraid if when you start doing that, it's hard for you, and also, this could be the first time that you're actually ever forced to reflect on these experiences. I know that it was for me when I started writing those applications. And so, if it's rusty to begin with, that's normal. The other piece is just like speak your truth. People will feel that. It's okay if, for example, you have maybe some things about your grammar aren't perfect in English, but if you can tell a good story, people are going to really resonate that. The other last piece that I'll share on that front is that when you're looking at your application, before you push send, is just take a step back from all of your application materials. There's often more than just a written component, and ask yourself, would I invest in me? Right? And ensure that there's this clear line and consistency in the message that's being communicated, whether it's your letters of support, your narrative, your CV, right? You're going to have probably 15 or 16 different versions of your resume. That's what happened to me. And because we have amazing tools now, you can very, very quickly do that with just like a base, CV, or just a master list. This is the other thing. Start keeping records of all of these things that you're involved in, the conferences that you attend, the conferences that you present at, any public speaking opportunities, volunteering things that you do, community-based activities or events that you volunteered for, whatever that is. Keep a record of that, because it's going to serve you very well when then you have to write an application, and then you're going to pull these different pieces into your narrative.
Okay, okay. So, the next question. What's the biggest mistake families make when they start looking for scholarships? What do you wish that someone had told you earlier?
I really liked these questions. What stood out to me about the first part is like, what's the biggest mistake families make? And I was like, oh, like, what a privilege that sounds like, to get support from your family, right? Because I did not. And so I think one of the hardest lessons that we learned was that even though my parents were together, my mom actually took full like financial responsibility for my sister and myself. That dynamic does not get reflected on a tax form. And so what happened was that when it came to filing what they call the FAFSA, where you have to show, you're basically trying to prove your financial need, we're like just above the threshold of poverty. And so none of the things that I would have loved to have been eligible for, I could apply for. We didn't find that out until really late in the game. And the other piece that I think was really challenging as it related to taxes was that when I moved out and I went to grad school in Minnesota, there was a lack of communication between my parents and they filed me as a dependent, even for the first year that I was in grad school, which like really hurt me financially, and it was just not communicated. So that's just like lesson learned. Please talk to your parents, kids, like just make sure that the communication is there ahead of time so that you can plan accordingly for savings and all of that good stuff. The other piece, what do I wish someone had told me earlier? I wish I had a sticky note or like put this on my phone, but it's so true. Everything is working out for you. It's always working in your favor, even when you don't think that it is. And I think that this piece of like, we are at any given time just divinely supported, being able to develop faith in that, right? Faith in yourself and your abilities, and that deeper sense of trust that like I'm supported by something that's bigger than myself. I think it was until I was about 24 that I started to develop that for myself. That was like 6 years in to my college experience when I was like first getting into the space of personal growth and development and like mental health and well-being. And I didn't grow up in a religious household. This concept of like faith was very foreign for me. And so I feel like that's something I wish I had a mentor who had sat me down and had had that conversation with me because I feel like I would have been so much better off. I would have worried a lot less. I would have probably taken more risks earlier than I did. It wasn't until graduate school that things really shifted because of that, where I started to perceive risk as different and I really changed as a person. The last piece I will share on that note is just like something I wish someone had told me earlier was you can manage deeply community-based work in a remote setting. And you're not just limited to marketing and graphic design, like tech-based work. And the key here is really in scale. So, kind of work that I do is at the regional and statewide scale. So, logistically, it doesn't make sense for people to be driving and getting together all the time. And that's where my role comes in. I get to be a facilitator of these really cool meetings with really cool, like sustainable ag folks who are all very deeply rooted in their community. And that's so, so special to me.
I'm excited for you. Okay, let's talk about lesser known funding sources. So, okay, Google. So we've covered Google. We know, look at the school itself, like the departments will have offerings. But what are some other lesser known places that you find money?
Yes. Well, there's a whole world of private funding. It's like wonderfully overwhelming. And that was, I think, one of the things that was very cool to learn early on. So there are databases out there where they will do the work for you. Basically, if you put in Google, like scholarship database, and then if you have an additional keyword that you want to add, fine. But really, just like the database piece is your keyword. And then what you'll do is for any of these databases, you'll end up creating a profile that describes what are you interested, what are you trying to find. I'm sure at this point there are more niche things that even beyond just doing scholarship funding. I would say there's a lot of prompting things that we could go down rabbit holes for in ChatGPT, for example, or Claude or whatever you're using. But essentially, creating that profile, what I would do is I would have these digests sent to my inbox on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. It could be very overwhelming. And then you would just learn to skim, and just like look for the right thing. Or you'd use like Command or Control F on your computer and put in the keyword that you were looking for to search through like 150 different options in like 20 seconds because then you're just like toggling down and it's just dragging you to the keyword that's related to what you're looking for. So there's these databases that are out there, right? A lot of those big names, right? There's like Fulbright scholarships, maybe like full ride scholarships based on your ACT or your SAT score. Like people are familiar with like TEFL, like teaching English abroad. But what I'm really seeing is some emerging opportunities and what I would recommend as the keywords when you are doing the search, whether it's in an AI tool or Google, are fellowships, accelerators, entrepreneurial startup programs. There's a lot of those out there. Service-based gap year programs would be another one. Digital nomad or remote worker visas, which are just budding and popping up everywhere, and then youth-based fellowships and funding opportunities. There's a really great newsletter. I'm going to send the link to this to Molly so that she can get it out to all of you, but it's called The Bloom. It is by far my favorite newsletter, and it's very creatively and thoughtfully curated. But at the bottom of it, they always have a list of different like job opportunities all across the globe. And their community is specifically designed for people that are really passionate about like social and mission driven businesses. Some of them are for profit, some of them are nonprofit, and a lot around like gender equity, environmental based, like NGOs. but these are really well-paying jobs, right? And there's also in almost every newsletter different fellowship opportunities specific to youth. And their range is really big. So like sometimes it can be like this is for people 13 to 18, right? And then there's other ones where it's like 18 to 25 or like 18 to 30. And so the youth piece, I'm seeing a lot more these really cool international conferences where it's like you've got a project idea and you pitch it and then you can get funding to then scale it, right? You have to be able to show that there's evidence of like there's a real need here, and I've seen this and this is the problem that I want to solve in my community. But I think it's that thing where it's like you just gotta kind of believe in yourself and just go for it. Like again, cast the net wide, put your name in the hat and see what happens. I've done that so many times and I did it with no expectation. I was just like, I'm gonna just do this and then like keep going with my life and forget about it. And then if it's for me, like things will work out. But I feel like having that set of keywords and coming up with your own keyword list is going to be the key for finding these things. The other piece that may be helpful is to narrow down your geography. So when you're trying to pair, these particular funding opportunities, if you have a particular country in mind, obviously add that to your list so that then you're having just that more like narrow funding source. One of the best practices that we've found in pretty much all of this, whether it's scholarship writing or grant writing that I do now, is to always start local and then start kind of like if you imagine these concentric rings going out, you start local, then you look at statewide opportunities, then you look at, like regional things, like could be multi-state depending on where you're located, federal, right? So like at the national level and then international competitions. As soon as you start getting into the international competition space, that's where things get like super, super, super competitive. And you're against people who, since like 12 years old, they started the first library in their hometown, right? So, like, there's crazy stories out there, and you're like, how can I compete against that? Like, I didn't even know that I liked to read until I was 13. Like, there's a lot. It's fierce. The other piece is also just like, trust yourself too, like believe in yourself because I've applied for those. I applied for an international fellowship to go to Middlebury College for their intensive language program for Spanish. I didn't know that I was like gonna be able to get in. And then I did, right? This girl from Kansas shows up and now she's like alongside all these Ivy League students, people that are going to like Yale and Harvard. I felt very uncomfortable in that environment, by the way. But it was a great learning opportunity. And so that's the other thing is just like believe in yourself, like keep casting the net, keep going for it, and eventually something will stick.
Okay,
Hey,
so
just real quick, Emily, before we move on, the Bloom newsletter, is it readtobloom.com?
Let's
We've
see.
got a couple people trying to find the newsletter link and we're having a little difficulty.
Yes. Yes,
All right,
yes.
perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, it's free. They have like a paid membership, but just getting access to the newsletter for free, so worth it.
okay, cool. Okay,
Awesome.
so on this call, the kids of the on this call are looking everywhere, like European universities, Mexican universities, gap year programs, like service fellowship things, residencies, looking at trade school, folk school. We learned about that in our last Zoom. So the funding paths that you're talking about, like the fellowships, the accelerators, that they have those types of things that will match to these non-traditional. So it's not just colleges and universities in the US and Canada. That's old news.
Correct. Yes. All of those kinds of funding opportunities are available for what you're looking for. In fact, some of them the purpose of applying is for funding to do the thing that you want to do. Right. And so that's the other thing is like they even have programs out there. I remember reading some of these and just being like, wow, I wish this existed when I was first going through college, where it's like, we're going to give you $50,000 to create the gap year of your dreams. What would you do with the money? Right.
Okay, we
Like
need a link to
these.
that right away.
Like those are the kinds of things that exist, right? And so I feel like when I'm thinking about where would you start, right? And because I feel like the overwhelm is probably the biggest thing that folks are dealing with. I've dealt with it as well. the whole analysis paralysis thing. You get stuck looping on the same things, the what ifs, imagining
Mhm.
lots of different scenarios and unsure like which one is the right one. Here's the thing, there is no right one. There's just the best one with the information that you have. And I think that the more and more that I live life and just find myself in very cool places, I feel like the more conviction that I have that if you can imagine it, it exists, right? So just like keep writing down those dream things that could come true, those experiences. Like, what kind of people do you want to be surrounded by? In what physical environment? Do you want to be close to an ocean? Do you want to be close to water features? And like, what are the kinds of conversations that you get to have on a regular basis with your peers? How far away are you from your family? How expensive is it to visit your family? Like, these are very legitimate questions. I have a sister that lives in freaking Australia now. You know what I'm looking at? How can I budget and generate enough revenue through my business so that I can spend, one trip a year to go visit my sister? This is just a reality of what it means for us to have like flown out of the nest and fallen very, very far from our hometown. And so I think that that's it's like those are the realities of what happened. I like that you put this poll up. How does your teen feel about what comes next? Excited, 20%, interested but unsure, 20%, wants independence but lacks a plan, 20%, overwhelmed. Absolutely. Yes. So I think
Last
that,
Zoom, we
yeah.
did the same poll and it was the same, like the majority, the field was overwhelmed, and I think it's that so many opportunities, so many options, where to even,
Yes. Well, and I think part of it is clarity around what you want. So, like here's another thing too, that piece of like it exists. Also, don't underestimate the power of asking other people to help you and create what you want. I can't tell you how many times like a position has been invented for me, right? Because I had an idea and I wanted to do a thing, but it didn't exist. And so then I talked to other people and was like, hey, would this be possible? So, for example, when I moved to Leon last year, I created what I called my DIY fellowship program. And I started jotting down ideas of like who would be my ideal mentors? What kinds of spaces would I visit? What are my learning outcomes? Like if I created my own fellowship program, what would I want to get out of the experience? And knowing that like I'm going to be in this city for 3 months, like, what am I going to do with this time? How am I going to take advantage of the resources and the people that are available right here? It was very cool, right? So you can also do that and have just this like very informal way of designing the life that you want while working a part-time job, right? As you get more clarity around what it is that you like. I think that there's so many young people that feel like you have to figure it out right now, and that when you take on a job, you're like signing up for life. And it's just not that way. We live in a very different world now. You have more options than you think. You can change your mind. It's actually encouraged, right? So that eventually you find yourself in a place where you're doing something that lights you up every day. You're surrounded by people that cherish you for who you are. You're getting paid good money. But that does not come without a lot of failure, a lot of self-reflection, and a lot of just like being able to receive feedback from other people too, right? Like that constructive criticism. How can I do better? How can I really up the bar on the standards that I'm setting? How am I setting healthy boundaries for myself around what I am and am not willing to accept? That's all part of this process, and it's not going to happen in one day.
yeah. Ugh. Okay. Um, for the
Well,
parent,
I was just going to say, I was just looking at the time. We've got about 12 minutes to our hour. I don't know
oh
what
my
more questions
gosh.
you have, but
Okay.
maybe
Um,
opportunity to open it up for questions or discussion.
okay, I just have one last one. Is what didn't I ask you that I
Oh,
should have asked you?
thank you. Okay, and I'll keep this one brief. Okay, so the question that I wished I had been asked was, what is the most valuable skill you've developed over the years that you wish you had started earlier? And my response to that is emotional regulation, which is not really something that we've talked about explicitly up to this point. But again, I would say that probably for me didn't start until I was like 24. I had moved away from my parents. I was starting my master's degree in Minnesota, and I just really like dove into this world of personal growth and development. And I have found 110% my ability to just keep my cool when times are getting heated, when other people around me are experiencing conflict, my ability to observe the way that they talk about a situation or themselves is a reflection of their values and their worldview. And I can sort of like separate that from me. Oh my gosh, like that is gold and it will serve you in the workplace, in your personal life. You'll be so much happier in the long term. And I just feel like knowing the kinds of students that you guys are all focused on and also the parents of, it's like that skill is just so, so helpful.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Emily. Okay, I used up all the time. I hope y'all, okay, what questions do we have?
My question, Emily, what was the name of that community college that you said that you went to?
Johnson County,
Johnson County?
Johnson County Community College in Overland Park, Kansas. I'll throw it in the chat here.
And then you went to community college straight to, I missed it, to Kansas?
Yeah. I kind of skipped over some of that. Sorry. Okay. So 2 years associate degree. Again, financial decision allowed me to stay for an extra year. I did a certificate program in sustainable agriculture entrepreneurship. I did that because if I had gone to the University of Kansas right after, I would have taken on, I think, like at least $8,000 worth of debt, just like right out the gate, or full ride scholarship for another year. And so I was like, I'm just going to go the full ride scholarship route. I know that I like grew up in a household of foodies, like farming, gardening is very much my jam, and I knew it would serve me well. Stuck around, and then that actually bought me time to apply for more scholarships and prepare for that transition to a 4 year school. I ended up doing one summer in between that program and when I started at KU at Middlebury. So I was studying Spanish through that program. It was a 7 week intensive language program, amazing, totally worth it. And also a full ride scholarship. That was like a $9,000 program in just that 7 weeks, right? So really cool. If I hadn't got that scholarship, I would not have gone, right? That was my rule. And then after that, I did go straight from my bachelor's degree in environmental studies. I minored in Spanish into my master's degree in urban and regional planning. I focused on food systems within that. And then I also did a graduate leadership certificate program in integrated food systems leadership. And so that one I negotiated with the department staff to have them count some of my electives as part of my planning program towards this graduate certificate program. So I extended my graduation by a semester, but then I graduated with like both a degree and a certificate that served me very well.
For me, I think that's the biggest takeaway for me and in my situation. One of the top options for my daughter is community college and then into a 4 year university. Never knew that scholarships for a community college were even a thing. Never would have thought to look for it. So just you saying that, I was like,
Absolutely.
what? That's nuts.
Yes. Yes,
I
yes.
had a full ride scholarship for community college too. And then because of my grades in community college, that's how I got a full ride scholarship. So I had a voice scholarship in music at community college. And then I got an academic scholarship when I went to university because I had good grades, which I didn't know before I was starting. I only went to community college because it was cheaper. I thought it was going to be cheaper, and then I ended up getting the scholarship. But that's my both my adult sons opted out of going to school at this point or going to college at this point. But that's what I recommended to both of them. I'm like, if you want to go to community college first because it's so much more affordable and not too difficult to get scholarships. I have a question about finding. I'm curious about finding funding for other some of the other stuff that you were talking about. Um, you had mentioned the databases for searching for scholarships. Do the same databases have the scholarships for college and university as there are for the gap year programs and some of the travel opportunities? Do you find the scholarships in the same place, or do you look for them in a different place?
Sometimes there's overlap and sometimes there's not. Because I've noticed, like when I was doing this recently with someone, there's like a toggle button or like filters where you can select like, oh, I just want to filter for gap year programs, or like, oh, I just want something that's eligible for like 4-year universities. Or like sometimes, for example, there will be ones where it's like, oh, this is all focused on private scholarships. Or there's lots of foundations out there that I got a lot of foundation scholarships actually. But again, the only way I found out about that was through the department that I was a part of, right? So sometimes it's like you got to get your foot in the door first, and then you start finding out about all kinds of things that were never publicly advertised. And they do that on purpose too. Like a lot of these foundations, they want to be confidential or private.
That's still confusing to me, but I'm going to chew on it.
It is, yes.
Okay, asking the language program. Yes, or no, the language program was through Middlebury College in Vermont. Okay, you already answered that. Okay.
Yes, and I threw in there too, to that point about like what's available at community colleges. I will say, this is me and like my multi-passionate self. Some of the things that I was considering when I was at that college, aside from the sustainable agriculture certificate program, was they had a fashion design program that I was interested in. They had a professional interpreting program, which I ended up taking about 10 years to do, but I just completed that program through Middlebury last month, actually. And then they had all of these like 1 and 2 year trade type things. So you could go to trade school to work on a railroad, for example. They had one that was just focused on like HVAC. Like if you wanted to become a plumber, it was like a 2 year program, super cheap. They had lots of full ride scholarships for that. If they wanted to go to welding, they also had that at the same community college. It was like a 1 or 2 year program. And then you've got the credentials to be like, yes, I can go out in the world and do this professionally and work for, a company and do this, or go out on my own. So I think there's a lot of that too, where it's like, if you start just like dabbling into some of these existing colleges and see what is the diversity that they have to offer, it's way more than just general education, like credits as well. There's a lot of niche programs.
Okay, so if you were graduating high school, international school in Mexico, what, where would where would you start looking for funding? Like, based on what opportunities would be open to you with this language, your bilingual, where would you start looking?
I think the first exercise that I would do before I even touch anything online is just saying, like writing down, I am happy when dot, 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 fill in the blank, right? Free write for like 10 minutes. Don't pick up your pencil or pen from the paper, just keep writing. And then come back to it and identify the themes, like distill what are the key words? Is there any repetition in here? Then use those keywords to work backwards to start finding your funding opportunities and experiences that can support those goals. That's how I would do it. Because I think that too often we feel like we have to have it defined first and then go look. But this like sort of like backwards way of like, I just want to feel this way, or like I want to be in this space, that can help you end up finding some things that you never even would have expected or looked for in the first place. So that's what I would do. And then honestly, like I would definitely use a ChatGPT or ChatGPT like tool to then start like doing a prompt, right? Provide enough context about your situation, financially and otherwise. What's your timeline? Put that information in. That's what I do when I'm writing grants for my clients. I need to know how much money you're looking for, by when, what's your current financial context, how much cash do you have on hand, how much money are you willing to take on in debt, if any, and like, what are your goals? What's your vision? Do you have limitations on geography and context? I work with a lot of farmers, so that's important, right? And then also like define whether you want it to be a public, a private, source of funds. And then you can even define like, I want both a name and a brief description of this funding opportunity. right? Like that's the prompt that I would put in all of those different components so that you're just getting the most useful information for you. And then you can go down other rabbit holes, like ask for hyperlinks and stuff like that to the different programs to look at them. But it's a good starting point. The other thing is just talk to people that have gone through the program themselves. I did an insane amount of informational interviews when I was in high school, and I wanted to know what I was getting into, and that helped a lot.
Thank you, Emily. Your parents must be super proud. Your mom's got to be like, I would be. I'd have a billboard in my town with your face on it.
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, she probably just misses me and my sister.
Yeah. Yeah.